Hello, everyone, and welcome to the public space. Today is an amazing day. We are speaking to Richard. It's been a while. Richard, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. Recovered from my winter cold, feeling good. I'm not affected by the coronavirus as of yet. I was a little bit afraid that my, January sniffles might turn into full-on corona, but I have escaped that fate.
There is a paranoia going on because I was just coughing a little bit on my last show and people were like, JF is infected. There is a true paranoia going on and it's somewhat justified. The current counts, of course, those are not totally up to date. The actual total death count has risen to 170. Total confirmed has risen to
Mm,
more than 7,000. And it is, if you compare it with graphs, and even this graph is outdated, but it is going faster than the SARS. We are already way above the SARS line here, and we have reached pretty much the death count of the SARS line, but we have reached it so quickly that
yeah.
people are worried. So do you have homebrew recipes for our audience on how to protect from the virus?
Well, I have some good bat recipes. Um, that we can offer. Braising a bat is really tasty, and a bats in a crock pot. It's just fantastic. I think basically we should just assume that this global pandemic will kill us all, and we should go out happy, eating the
Enjoy the
finest
battle last
Cantonese
time.
cuisine possible. Yes.
Hot stuff. I hear you can get this at a couple of places. All right.
Yes.
So yeah, the coronavirus is going fast. People are being critical of the Chinese government. As I said yesterday on my show, personally, I'm not critical of the Chinese government. They are dealing with limits of knowledge, limits of
Yeah.
resources. You just can't properly quarantine 7,000 people, especially when you don't know that it's going to be that rough. So personally, I have not been critical of what I've seen. People are doing their best. I would be very surprised if we were to succeed at containing it in the West. But given the superior number of precautions taken, the superior quarantine practices, the superior material and equipment that we have access to in our hospitals, it could happen.
Yes, I don't have major criticisms of the Chinese government as well. It's certainly possible that they are underplaying the numbers. That seems like a reasonable concern. But in terms of shutting down major regions and so on, in terms of outflows and inflows, they seem to be doing what they can. It is this, interesting quandary of what all of this represents, and in some ways, it is, you could say, globalism biting back. And just to make sure that I'm not, engaging in hysteria or something, let's remember that some 50,000 people die each year of influenza in the United States. That actually is a pretty shocking number. If 50,000 people drop dead due to a new animal born virus, in a 2-month period or something, I think there actually would be riots and bank runs and raids of grocery stores and things like that. So it's just normal. We accept it. But it is a very real thing, and so nothing like that death toll that we, don't even know about each year, has occurred in China. So I don't think we should get totally hysteric. But yeah, I mean, there are a few things going on. First off, there is the ability of viruses to evolve or mutate. They're not quite life forms, but they kind of are, and they're certainly
Personally, I
subject.
say it is a life form. Viruses
Okay.
are life forms. We're just being speciesist. We are being unjust when we look at viruses and don't
Okay.
attribute to them the respect that we attribute to ourselves.
Yes. Virus lives matter. Yes. I know there is a bit of a debate, kind of
Yes,
like
there is.
um,
I mean, I was
you know,
teaching biology at the university level, and I was dealing with textbooks that were teaching my student that viruses are not alive, and I was like, ignore this page of the face of the textbook.
well, they can mutate, and they, in a way, have interest, you could say.
Yeah.
But anyway, there obviously has been a tremendous spread of advanced Western medicine over the past century and a half. And that has led to dramatic drops in infant mortality. That's led to, a higher life expectancy and so on. But there are these problems to that, and this problem of a kind of whiplash effect. First off, of people not taking a full term of their medication and effectively culling the weak viruses and allowing the strong to survive. And that could be said even if people are taking the full term of the medication. So there can be an effect of basically these viruses becoming evolved to super viruses and being able to survive and becoming much worse. I'm reminded of the also in terms of just global population and so on. I'm reminded of the 1988 Yellowstone Park fires that actually led to major reforms in fire management in national parks. But the general tendency, or modus operandi before then, was to put out any fire whenever possible, whenever it occurred. And this basically led to this massive amount of kindling accumulating in the national parks. And when they couldn't control a small fire, it became a huge, uncontrollable, catastrophic fire that almost did, irreparable damage to some of the treasures of that park. And they've since changed their policy, which is that you have to allow some of these to burn. One can find an analogy with global population levels and so on, that we're kind of building up a lot of kindling in the sense of
I
in
love
the
this analogy. I love it.
In the sense of allowing a ton of unhealthy people to survive. Globalization itself can spread this virus far more quickly. Obviously, globalization is not a entirely new thing. People throughout the centuries were traveling around, trading, and so on. But it is dramatically different with low-priced airfare. And the internationalization of business, of universities, of travel, mass immigration, the whole kit and caboodle. It sets up a way where these things can just these viruses can be transferred from, Wuhan to Chicago in over the course of a flight, basically, and we feel like we can't stop it. That we're part of this massive system. That at this point, to slam the brakes on it is almost impossible, and might also cause tremendous economic dislocations and so on. So I think there is that aspect to it. I rewatched this film, or I watched for the first time this film called Contagion, which is made by Steven Soderbergh around 10 years ago. And it's not really a great film. You don't have to watch it. I guess I just caught the coronavirus virus. I wanted to watch these films. And one thing that I was taken by was the sense of helplessness by global leaders and the world ministries of health and so on, just their inability to stop this kind of thing. And also this almost kind of sense of guilt, you could say, where it was the virus was in a weird way kind of payback for globalization. that everyone in that film was flawed in some way, and that they were kind of receiving their comeuppance, whether it was a sin, like the patient zero was actually an adulteress, and everyone in that film kind of was flawed, and they were almost being paid back for it. And obviously, this is not what's actually happening. This is just kind of what's symbolically happening. But I think something like a global pandemic is almost the kind of flip side, the hangover of globalization, and the mass increase of Western medicine and so on. And I say this, of course, in a symbolic way. But I don't know what will happen with this. It might very well decline. It is rising at a clearly parabolic rate. And it has a basic reproduction number above 1, which means that the virus will continue. I think the reproduction number is, I've seen various things of 3 to 8, something like that. That basically means that for each person who is infected by the virus, how many people will he infect? From what I understand, the typical influenza is around 1.4 or so. So you will infect someone, your coworker, a family member, and so on. But it won't really go beyond that. This is simply higher than that. And again, the virus can mutate and can become more devastating. So something like this will happen. There will be a paradigm changing epidemic like this at some point. Whether the coronavirus is it, I have no idea.
Absolutely. I totally agree with everything you've said. I think that we are brought to realize the wealth that we had, which was not counted in dollars, but 100 years ago, we lived more isolated lives, and we were in circles of trust, and a virus would have spread. We would have known before. At this point, people are so much together, so close to each other. These big cities that we're building, this has not survived the test of time. Big cities, they rise and they fall, and we may find that our big cities that we've invented and the interconnected world that we've invented is bound to fall. And it may be another virus, but it could be this one too. Many news are coming out. The British are stopping all flights to China. Delta temporarily reduces number of flights to China. I think that it is actions that are necessary at this point, but probably too late. As I've said many times in the last few days, the virus is probably in hundreds of thousands of people, if not millions already. And so I would be surprised that these flight stops will help, but at least I think they are a way for our leaders to be able to argue that at least they've done what they could when they knew.
Yes, Trump is apparently monitoring the situation.
And we also heard today that the World Health Organization, or is it Women Health Organization, has admitted an error in its assessment of Wuhan coronavirus risk. Initially, they had said that the risk was moderate and they had refused to declare an international emergency. They still refused to declare an international emergency, but they said that their evaluation in moderate terms was wrong, and now they say it is a high risk or very high problem for China at least, and they say it could rise to very high in other countries too.
I don't doubt that assessment. I do think that this is real. Whether this will grow into something like the Great Influenza, something that's been kind of lost to history. More Americans died of the flu following the First World War and the immediate aftermath of that, the Great War, than died in the war itself. It was known as the Spanish flu, I think, because it was publicized in Spain. More so, but it was absolutely devastating in the United States, and it interestingly was affecting men and young men more than any other group in the country. So these things are very real. We're almost due for something like this. We actually have we obviously have better antibiotics, and ways of dealing with it, better communication than we did in 1919. But again, that was a epidemic that killed in the tens of millions. There are estimates between 20 and 80, even 100 million deaths due to this. This is absolutely devastating, far worse than any of the kind of hot button things that politicians care about, like terror attacks or something like this. And I think ultimately these people are going to be managing something like this. They're not going to be stopping it.
Absolutely. We have a couple of reactions from the crowd. Citizen Olympic says, Richard, I know this is off topic, but I've been meaning to ask you this for some time. Would you consider doing a review of the 2016 movie, The Greasy Strangler?
I have never heard of that movie. The
Me neither.
Strangler.
The Greasy Strangler. I don't know if it's a meme or an actual movie, but I'll be researching it. Cheeky Pop says, Richard, have you watched B-Movie yet?
No, sorry. God, this guy must hate me.
I'm about to become a millionaire just by the number of people super chatting you about B-Movie. Jason Thomas says, I, for one, welcome the bat. No, I'm not reading the rest of your super chat. Chris Cleveridge says, has Richard seen Netflix The King?
No. What is that film about?
I don't know about it. The King, those Netflix movies, they're now engaged in the production of movies.
Yes.
The King 2019, Hal, wayward prince and heir to the English throne, is crowned King Henry V after his tyrannical father dies. Now the young king must navigate palace politics, the war his father left behind, and the emotional strings of his past life. It seems to be a medieval time type of thing.
Henry V, kind of.
Yes.
They're doing a Netflix version of a obviously famous Shakespeare play. That might be interesting.
Absolutely. What did I want? Oh yeah, I want to talk about something. It's an announcement. It's the right time to do it. And I think, Richard, you might be excited about this. It's an idea that I had, and I proposed it on my show, and some entrepreneur that is part of my audience named Good Guy has been taking it over his shoulder. And right now he's looking for someone in the crowd who has a special capacity. What we're looking for is developers who are familiar with the programming language TypeScript, the framework React, and the backend Firebase. So if you are a programmer in our crowd and you are interested in this project, contact Good Guy on my Discord. And in fact, I will give on the regular chat the email that you can send to. I think I have his email here. Here's the project. So we want to make a website, and I'm not involved in it. I'm just the original ID generator. It's a website that will force intellectuals to engage with each other, to debate with one another, and we do this by using pledges. So if there's a crowd that wants to see Richard Spencer just blood sports Jordan Peterson for 2 hours, you guys put $10, $100, $1,000, and eventually it stacks, and we find ourselves in a few months from now, and there's $1 million accumulated for Richard Spencer to engage in the blood sports with Jordan Peterson. Now, of course, Richard is an intellectual. He likes to fight with anyone, and he will engage with anyone. But Jordan Peterson cannot say no to $1 million. So that's the idea. We put money to put pressure on intellectuals so that you actually have people engage with one another in good faith. And we want to have a monetary incentive for the intellectuals who do it. And it's not Jordan Peterson or Richard Spencer starting these pages. It is fan-based. You guys, the audience, will be starting the debates that you want, and you'll be funding it with your own campaigns. Richard, what do you think about this?
I think this is a great idea, and I think the debate you just proposed would be a fantastic thing. And if it got big enough, then Jordan could say that he's donating it to charity or something. But which is I don't know, probably
This is
some
exactly what I
grift
was thinking. I was
paleo
thinking,
diet thing run by his daughter. But anyway, yeah, I think it's obviously a fantastic thing, and it promotes discourse and entertainment, and it's absolutely fantastic. I would mention that these projects, building these platforms and these bigger projects are difficult, so it needs to be taken seriously. There were earlier kind of projects that emerged from the alt right writ large, like WeSearcher and so on. That one was about bounties on stories, which kind of always struck me as a very nasty kind of piece of work. Like you'll get paid $10,000 to go dig up dirt on someone, but
yeah.
nevertheless, that was one of these projects that kind of sounds good and then gets aborted. So if you're going to build a platform like this, it is a serious thing that will probably be a full-time job for someone. But I hope it works, because it sounds great. And yeah, I agree. That's the hard thing, is that people like myself, I'm taboo and so on, and so I can't get access to, say, I don't know, debating Cenk Unger, or debating Jordan Peterson, all of which could be very interesting. And so we're all locked in our own little ghettos and kind of talking to each other, which is good. But for someone like me who wants to get out there and wants to engage with people, I think this could be a great thing. So I definitely give it my support, but with the caveat that whoever is doing this needs to take this seriously and bring it to fruition and maintain it. And so this isn't just some kind of cute thing that we come up with, and then 9 months later we've forgotten that we ever did it.
Absolutely. And I'm right now putting the email that you can email to if you are a programmer, leet.email@pm.me. It is in the regular chat. What they are looking for, again, is a programming language, TypeScript, framework, React, backend, Firebase. If you know these things, they need someone like you, because right now they have one entrepreneur who seems to have the funds and the business acumen to make it happen, and they already have a couple of developers who are experienced. They need someone with these specific skills, and then the team is complete. You are correct. A lot of these projects, they fall. What I can do for this project is, of course, I don't want to get involved in the organization of it, but I want to make it succeed. So once it's up, I want to meme on the social media to make it popular. And I can imagine 4chan going wild with this and exploring different possibilities of debate. And as you mentioned, what a lot of these intellectuals need is actually an excuse. Like if they can say, look, there was $1 million, I will not say no to this. If they could just say this or combine it with a charity donation, much of their base would be not harassing them for doing it.
I'm going to keep the money.
I
don't need to hide behind charity.
And I see that Killing Time says the price should be in Bitcoin. Absolutely. Good Guy is an expert in e-stars and making all of this cryptocurrency based also. So it's not just going to be credit card. There's going to be all sorts of payment options. I'm very enthusiastic about the project. Titor Sean says, Richard, who would you debate right now? Please no dodge.
I anywhere, anytime. I've never, I don't really want to debate some of these weird internet figures. I've been offered debates with some of these people that I've never really heard of, but they're gamers and things like that. And I'm just like, I'm not really, not interested. I don't think this is very productive, but most anyone else I would debate. I don't, there's no person I fear, even the ones that disagree with me that are quite intelligent. I think I would actually get something out of it. So anyone who's
All
serious and
right.
who treats me with respect, obviously, that's the.
And talking about mainstream exposure of our IDs, I've went to the CBS interview. Have you heard from them
Oh,
still since then?
I kind of ghosted it to be. I just got a bad feeling about it, and I think on your show I said, oh, I think I will do this if I could. I'm just, I feel so busy right now doing family stuff and then doing my own stuff that just giving my time to media, flying somewhere. I'm not. It just wasn't really in the cards, and I just seemed to get a bad feeling about the whole thing. And then I guess you reported back that it was just kind of like, so tell me, JF, how are you radicalizing spree shooters? What are your methods and generating school violence and things? It's just kind of like I don't.
That's exactly what it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, and people were discussing in the end. I did a good performance, and more people would want to improve this documentary if they decided to go for a smear of YouTubers in general. It might as well be limited, and we might as well give them the most little amount of stuff possible, so that they have less ways of escaping really the good points I've been making. So in the end, I think it's not that important, and I'm happy of having represented us fairly in this
Yeah.
interview. I understand that it's not worth the time. I mean, I took 2 days of vacation, 2 days without show. I cut myself from income. I didn't even ask them to reimburse any expense. So it was a gift that I gave to them. I hope that they will not put me under a train since I've been so generous to them. All right, we have other questions. The Maza says, "Hey, Richard, do you think it's possible that Douglas McKay and his company used the Clearview AI software to dox Charlottesville attendees? It might explain why so many people were doxed so quickly."
I'm not sure I buy that accusation, but I do think that there were uh, really huge problems going on with. I just mentioned We Searcher. The other one was called Smart Checker. Very similar names. Both are attached to Chuck Johnson, this, you know, international man of mystery that he is. Kind of has his hands in all sorts of pies. There's actually a new article coming out in the Huffington Post that I gave a quote to about this issue. And there have been numerous articles that have come out in the past week since it was first reported in the New York Times. So basically, there is a company called what is a Clearview. That is the name of the company. I always forget these, Silicon Valley like names, and it is basically a facial recognition software that was being marketed to law enforcement. And what it was claiming to do is that it could see any face through, um, that take it on a smartphone, through potentially through surveillance cameras or so on. And it would go to a database of faces scraped from social media accounts, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, what have you. And it could recognize the person and identify them. And this does, bring up all sorts of, generally terrifying ideas of surveillance capitalism, basically, of our using these products as ways to connect with everyone and express our opinion, and then these just being used against us in this totalitarian way. But it's not totalitarianism from a state exactly. It's totalitarianism from Silicon Valley. It's a new thing that no one is used to, and basically every person is generally horrified by this. Even if we're not up to anything wrong, just the idea that everything we do is in some database somewhere is disconcerting, to say the least. However, there is a kind of alt-right angle to this, which I think that questioner brought up, And that was so there's this figure named Ricky Vaughn. I first encountered him either in 2015 or 2016 as a Twitter account with a substantial following in the tens of thousands. And his reach seemed to be much greater than that. And he was basically I don't know, a photo snapshot of that 2015, 2016 period with Donald Trump. He would tweet like the Drudge Report, just throwing news out there, retweeting Trump and so on. And then he would add to it this, outlandish comments that were, straight out of TRS, kind of Nazi kind of lulls, brutal attacks on liberal journalists, and various things like that. It was a moment in time. And it seemed to not have legs outside of the campaign. And I remember immediately afterward in early 2017, there was this determination that we're no longer the alt-right, we're the new right, and we're the establishment now, and so on. Then he reemerged in 2018 with the Paul Nehlen campaign and the optics debate, so-called, that came after Charlottesville, in which, the debate itself was kind of a straw man, you could say, in the sense that it was a way of attacking the movement, but rather deceptively, by saying, look, everyone in the movement wants to be cartoonish, insane, violent Nazis, but we, on the other hand, are actually pragmatic. And it's just kind of like, this is, this is not fair or serious. You're ginning up divisive, poisonous attacks, and you're not actually saying anything. And even the fact that you're saying it is kind of ridiculous. It's like announcing your plan, a la a James Bond villain, but doing it to the world. Like, it's not a serious thing. And in 2018, Paul Nehlen really came onto the scene. I had learned about him in 2016 when he ran an unsuccessful campaign, a primary campaign against Paul Ryan. And that was kind of the emergence of the Trump Republican. So someone who was running against the GOP establishment. Maybe it's not exactly new. We saw this with the Tea Party, but it had a Trump vibe to it. And he was running against Paul Ryan. He did that unsuccessfully. And then in 2018, he was doing it again. And this time he had Bannon's support. He was working with Bannon in Alabama, and so on. And everyone was getting very excited about this. While he was doing that, I was someone who in 2017 was sounding the alarm bells on Paul Nehlen, to be honest, because he was already engaging in outlandish kind of alt-right tweeting. And he was going on shows, podcast like Fash the Nation, which, it's a TRS podcast. I don't know. I don't think much of it, but whatever. There's a lot of infotainment going on. Mm-hmm. And my point was, and this is what I made in, actually, I think I posted this video and commentary on New Year's Eve. Sorry, I need to turn off notifications.
It's good to hear this story, because I actually didn't know who Ricky Vaughn was, and it's the first time I hear it all laid out.
Yes. And so I published a commentary where I was basically saying to Paul Nehlen, look, you've got to make a decision here. You're either going to be a renegade mainstream candidate who can actually win, or you're going to be a quixotic Ron Paul like candidate. Now, if I were to run for office, I would obviously attempt to win, but I would recognize that my campaign was more of an educational one. It was a long shot. It is about making headlines, getting attention, and then bringing forth a new message. And Ron Paul did run successful quixotic campaigns that raised millions of dollars, brought libertarianism to the map, to people's radar screen where it otherwise would not be, and created a movement. You could criticize it all you want, but it did achieve those things. Paul Nehlen seemed to be running a campaign that was the worst of both worlds. It was, on the one hand, the 4chan campaign of, memes and vicious attacks and just all this nonsense. And then on the other hand, it was this kind of non-radical populist mainstream campaign where he just sounded like Steve Bannon. It's just kind of like you're delegitimizing yourself by being this edgy on social media, and then what you're actually putting forth is not that interesting. You're not really breaking any paradigms. It's just the worst of both worlds. I was not a Paul Nehlen fan, to say the least. Then, but he was being supported actively by TRS types, Ricky Vaughn, Weave, and all those types of people. And so Ricky Vaughn, and according to documents that were released, and according to Paul Nehlen's words, Ricky Vaughn approached him and was offering his services to the Paul Nehlen campaign in 2018. And what he was offering wasn't just, I will support you on social media among my followers, or I'll run your Facebook page, but he was offering this smart checker organization that was basically was birthed out of this person whose name I'm forgetting, Tone Thought, I believe. You can look it up. He's a Australian of Vietnamese background. And this organization that was formed by a Giuliani associate out of New York City that was offering, again, not just social media, content production, but facial recognition, artificial intelligence, and so on. When Paul Nehlen eventually, he did allow Ricky Vaughn control of his Facebook page for a little while, and then decided that this was not worth $2,500 a month or whatever he was asking, and basically said, I don't want to work with you. And that then there was a complete flip in which, and I do think this was most likely coordinated behind the scenes, in which all of Nehlen's erstwhile fans, including Nick Fuentes and Weave and Andrew Anglin, all those people, and Ricky Vaughn, just turned on him on a dime.
Nick Fuentes was a Paul Nehlen fan?
Say again?
Nick Fuentes was a Paul Nehlen fan?
Oh, totally. Absolutely. This is what the alt-right needs to do. You stupid low IQ wignats just want to go LARP and, whatever, but Paul Nehlen's winning. And then it just flipped and it turned on a dime. And I guess my point, and you could probably point to some, catalyst that did this, one too many edgy memes. But my point was, people like me saw this coming a mile away. Like, he was doing the exact same thing in 2017. He might have been slightly worse, but this is exactly the kind of worst of all possible worlds campaigns that he was running. But again, all of these people behind him were then turning on him. Paul Nehlen freaked out, and he eventually doxed Ricky Vaughn. And that was kind of a point of no return. He revealed that Ricky Vaughn was Douglas Mackey, and then he became Saint Ricky Vaughn, the poor martyr, and so on. I did not have a dog in that fight. Can't they both lose? And they kind of both did lose. So I guess I kind of won. I did feel like the optics debate was ultimately leading to my head being put on the chopping block, and people who were connected to these scenes told me that as well, that it was only a matter of time before bad optics, Nazi LARPing, a lunatic Richard Spencer would be attacked by everyone. So it was a very bad, poisonous vibe. Now, everyone focused on doxing and the ethics of doxing and so on. And I don't think we really focused on the nitty gritty, which was this company called Smart Checker that's involved with a Giuliani associate out of New York City, Chuck Johnson, and Ricky Vaughn, which was offering facial recognition software. Now, the fact is, this made sense in terms of running the kind of a Paul Nehlen type campaign in the sense that in 2016, I don't believe that Donald Trump could have become president without the alt-right. I do not think that the alt-right was a detriment to his campaign, even though we might have kind of been bad optics on some level, offending the mainstream media and whatever. But I think the good easily outweighed the bad. And that is that we made Trump a thing. We didn't make him just a Republican that you could vote for because the Democrats are worse. We made him a social movement and revolution that was attractive to young people, that was attracted to people who are otherwise apathetic or utterly cynical. This man was changing everything. He was going to, blow out the deep state and institute, real nationalism in this country. And,
Drain the swamp.
all the e-thoughts were going to be put in prison and so on. I mean, all of these things that were a bit silly, but, we made him a thing. And I think we were an indispensable component of it. No one voted for Hillary Clinton because they were voting for a revolution. They were pulling the lever for Hillary because it's like, I guess I should. With Trump, it was like, I have got to go vote for Donald Trump. And you could come up with a variety of ways. Hillary's worse on foreign policy. The immigration is out of control, et cetera. But whatever it was, we made him a thing. And but the problem with the alt-right, unlike the Tea Party, although some of these were also aspects of the Tea Party as well, is that the alt-right, because it is so edgy and taboo, it must be anonymous. So how do you handle this? How do you channel this energy of the alt-right and perhaps fundraise off it? Well, the way to do that is some kind of artificial intelligence, whether it's facial recognition software or just, data scraping and so on. How do you channel those people? So you get key leaders who are able to push the movement in a certain direction. You have Ricky Vaughn, Weave, Andrew Anglin, et cetera. And then also you start to data mine, or TRS is certainly part of this. TRS was promoting Ricky Vaughn. They were, lamenting this terrible, death of our, savior afterwards and so on. And you basically start to identify who the individuals in the alt-right are, and you channel them and fundraise off them. You basically get out the vote with the alt-right, which was a nut that seemingly could not be cracked in 2016, but could possibly be cracked with this kind of technology. Now, I am highly skeptical about this technology, and other mainstream reports on this are equally skeptical. The group Smart Checker, Clear Review, they claim to have, caught a terrorist and so on. These are actually dubious claims. Now, whether I'm right to be skeptical or I'm wrong, and this really is a new technology, that's ultimately irrelevant to the general concern, which was there was a clear movement to channel and identify the alt-right in 2018 and 2019. It's still going on. And despite the fact that all of these mainstream guys want to bash the alt-right and say we're actually leftist or we're Bernie bros or whatever, there are people who recognize the alt-right for what it is, and that is an energy-producing source. And they would be stupid not to use it. So this is going to be ongoing. There will be attempts. There have already been attempts that we've seen with, the Groyper stuff and so on, to get an alt-right that is Republican friendly, that's edgy and taboo, massively politically incorrect, but is ultimately going to be in support of Donald Trump. I don't support this. I'm not even indifferent to it. It's not my thing, obviously, but I'm not even indifferent to it. I don't want this kind of thing to happen. But there are people operating behind the scenes in order to do this. Smart Checker, Clearview, Chuck Johnson, this Australian guy, and who I met briefly at one point, Pax Dickinson, etc. You have all of these kind of weird behind the scenes operator types who want to do this. And it is a very serious concern. I don't agree with the question asked by the super chat that this was behind Charlottesville. I don't have any evidence for that, and I don't think they would be the ones doing that. However, the real threat of these types of people, it remains. And it is not something that is good. Even if they're not Antifa out there doxing you, they still want to identify you, which many people view as a threat. Not me, obviously. I'm well past that. But I think there's a bigger thing, which is that just taking all of this energy, which could be used to actually change the paradigm and could be used to build institutions, create real social and intellectual change, is going to be mobilized every 2 years for Republicans. And I don't want that. I think that's actually a very bad thing. I would rather the movement be less mobilized and smaller if we're doing serious work and we're building real things, real institutions, and so on. That is what I want. And I think people like Ricky Vaughn and others who have always been against me recognize that Spencer wants a different type of movement. Spencer doesn't want this, you know, Nazi Catholics for Trump type movement. Paul Neyland's amazing, like liberal tears. Spencer clearly does not want that. And he will not support us. So I have always been hated by these people. I'm not in touch with them. And thank God I'm not in touch with them because, you know, stuff is coming out. It's not going to be pretty.
This is fascinating and very worrying. So essentially, these people are trying to operate changes in the political forces without doing the intellectual work to really rethink our metapolitics and think how moving a small piece can change the entire board. They want to cheat. They want to use the rules on their sides without doing the thinking. It is absolutely fascinating, and I think you're right.
They want to grift off the energy.
Yeah. And I think you're right.
It's like I'm an idealist. I want something bigger and better in the future. These guys want to, bash liberal journalists and fundraise for stupid candidates. And I'm just not interested, guys. It's not even that I'm indifferent. I am actually hostile towards that kind of myopic, stupid, typical Republican crap. And the kind of crap that ultimately destroys movements. Whatever you want to say about the Tea Party, there actually was some radical energy going on there. There's Ron Paul-like energy. I mean, the Tea Party meme was begun during the Ron Paul campaign. There is a kind of implicitly white populist energy there as well. Well, where is the Tea Party now? The Tea Party elected a bunch of Republicans who are now enforcing Paul Ryan's agenda. It elected Mike Pompeo, et cetera. It ultimately destroys movements. And the Tea Party now is looked back upon as kind of a joke. They didn't really change discourse in any way. And I want to do that. And so these types of people are my enemies. Now, it's easy to take that short, cheap way to the semblance of power. And this is where the movement was in 2018. It's we're not alt-right. The alt-right's cringe. We're just American nationalists who support Republicans. Well, your former co-host, I remember, was big into this. It ultimately is cheap, and other people are going to benefit from it. The Pax Dickinson, Chuck Johnson types are going to come and grift off your energy that you create for 6 months, and then they will leave you. They have no interest in the kind of things that serious people in this movement have interest in. That is not even on their radar screen. They will be nice to you for a period of time when they think that they can ultimately grift off your energy. And at some point, I didn't tell these people no hard enough in 2016 and 2017. But we've got to learn from this experience, recognize these just weird kind of bad actors, behind the scenes types, and just say no to them, and stop helping them along when they don't have any of our interest at heart.
Fascinating. Furious, since we're talking about the movement, he says, Millennial Woes said you guys had a falling out. Is that true? This is unfortunate because I know a lot of people were looking forward to seeing you appear again on the Millennial.
Yeah, I was on Millennial many times, and I've done stuff with Woes. I just found Millennial Woes a bit annoying, and he seems to be friends with people who have done a lot of just tedious, annoying things to me behind the scenes. And, you know, I don't have any, I don't think about him that much. I don't really have any great emotional investment in anything like this. I don't know. I just want to work with people whom I'm comfortable with and whom I can trust. And I felt like my experience over 2017 was building this big tent, getting everyone on board, working with them, et cetera. And the second the movement takes a turn, all of these people whom I thought were colleagues, comrades, friends, turn on you for reasons that I find inexplicable and petty at best. And I'm just not going to do it anymore. I would rather work with a smaller group of people whom I'm comfortable with, and who I know have the psychological profile that they're not going to just go with the flow, jump on some mood of the movement, and people who are serious and so on. So I don't know. I've in my mind, I'm not burned any bridge with Millennial Woes, but I don't know.
Yeah, it's fascinating to see so many YouTubers do the same error. They're trying to surf waves, and I can understand because in the end, the genesis of a YouTuber is surfing your first wave of memes and rising. But you have to understand if you're a YouTuber or a attention gatherer of any kind on social media, that people are headed toward us because we provide them pillars of intellectual and emotional stability and thought. And so if you keep surfing the waves, you have a bunch of audience you will eventually lose them with time, because people get to us ultimately because we represent something solid.
Right. And I want to be around people who respect that. Yeah, it is, when I think back over the last few years, these types of people who were reaching out to me, who want a little piece of that energy that was surrounding me in 2017. And then by 2018 or later, were denouncing me, even though, I'm the same guy. I'm saying the same things. I'm basically doing the same things. But all of these people were, again, just going with the flow, going with the mood, and flipping back and forth. And basically, it you don't have to denounce people. I don't know. I'm just thinking of an excellent example. Faith Goldie, this, we need to be part of the alt-right. The alt-right's awesome. And then, I think tweeting out Richard Spencer he's to blame for everything, or it's just kind of like, you're not a serious, stable person when you flip between those two poles. It's actually somewhere in the middle. I am who I am. And I just, but that's what the movement does. And I think it's actually a fatal flaw. It will prevent the movement from ever going beyond anything, because we're always jumping on these trends. The trends burn out, and then we're kind of starting from ground zero again. The Groyper thing, excellent example. What was really gained by all that? Not a whole lot.
Money for streamers.
Money for streamers. Wow.
That's what was gained. Nick Fuentes will have a house. free speech.
Right.
And I think, you know, when you say we are who we are, I think you're absolutely right. And there is a form of dehumanization in this movement, which is absolutely disgusting and totally inadequate. It's like, consider that the people who sacrifice their name, like me and Richard, we use our real name. We are human beings. We are on a path of learning, and we're not perfect, but to be dropped based on the considerations and the flavors of the week, that it just shows the childishness of some people who claim to be in that movement, but who, as far as I can see, are just anonymous people on a regular chat.
Right.
All right. Free speech says, you spoke with the cat boy on Killstream. Was awesome. Your point was we must persuade the elite and 10% ERS. You mentioned political parties. Are you going to do this, or what are you going to do this to do this? How are you going to do this?
Right. So yeah, I was on the kill stream, I don't know, a week ago or two, and apparently, I'm not 100% sure this was actually him, but Catboy rang in, and I to give him some credit here, I guess. He was actually more down to earth and respectful than I would have imagined just from the little clips of him that I've seen. So there it is. But yeah, I mean, I don't. I think again, this we've been talking about this before, of this cheap and easy path of you're trying. Oh, we need to reach these Zoomers who they only speak the language of gay rent boys sucking dildos on live streams or whatever. So we've got to do that in order to yeah, I mean, this makes absolutely no sense. All of these people have no influence or power. They will never really be respected. They clearly have serious psychological problems, perhaps no fault of their own at some level. But the idea that we need to be like them or do something that they like in order to appeal to them or something, it just strikes me as absolute lunacy. When you reach an elite person, even an influencer, a real person who's substantial and lasting, that is the equivalent of 10,000 or 100,000 anonymous troll accounts or something. We just simply do not. We need to drag those people along with us and discard them if we have to. We need to try to reach real people. That is the way to power and influence. It is not this just wholesale appeal to people who are trapped in these nihilistic cycles. So that is my view. I have no idea what possible strategy could involve cat boys or whatever. And to be frank, I think red-blooded Americans probably like me and resonate with me and what I do and the way I look and act a hell of a lot more than some bizarre internet creature. So there it is. In terms of the political party, yeah, I think it's obvious what we ultimately need to do. I have, been around this movement for more than a decade now, and I've heard a billion strategy sessions, undertaken by anonymous people about how the Republican Party will fail and they'll turn to us and reach out to us and all this. It's just all this talk. It's strategy as entertainment. It's all this talk about something that is probably not going to ever happen. And at some point, you have to be the change you want to see in the world. And that means real institutions where we are what we are and we say what we mean and we mean what we say. That is the ultimate solution. Now, in order for such an institution to come into being, many more funds need to be raised, but that kind of work, that isn't cheap and easy, that's not gonna, no one's gonna reward that kind of work with a super chat or with a little, Venmo payment of $20 because you had a great tweet or you did something funny, online, you screamed at a liberal or something. I mean, it's just that kind of stuff does not get rewarded immediately, but it's the kind of thing that needs to take place. I think the right in general seems to have a much smaller time horizon than the left. The left have donors that they have big money people who say, this is what we want. We want this major institution. We're going to go hire these people. We're going to set the capital foundations now. The right seems to be a kind of, Caitlin Bennett type operation where you do something funny or based or outlandish or whatever, and then some boomers or whatever throw $20 your way, and it kind of adds up to a lot. Well, we're just rewarding all of this short-term false pragmatism. And the way you win is that you look at these organizations that have won in the past. They weren't chasing super chats. They weren't chasing little donations. They weren't chasing clicks. They weren't chasing retweets. They were slowly building an institution. And that's what we have to do. Like, that is where we need to be. So why don't we move towards that point as opposed to wasting more time strategizing about how, the American people are fed up and one day they're going to do this. It's just, I've heard all of this before. I've heard it all before from the same people, in fact, who decades go by and they learn nothing. I'm tired of it. If the movement wants to just be in this limbo forever, doing based podcast about anti-white discrimination, go for it. That shit bores me. And I'm just not interested. I don't listen to it. I don't gain anything from it. I don't know why people listen to it. We all get some of these basic ideas. The real challenge is what we do next. And I think the answer is obvious. This is where we ultimately want to be. And so why don't we just start doing it? As opposed to waiting for, we're going to red pill everyone or something, going to red pill humanity. It's never going to happen. It's never going to happen. We just have to create the actual infrastructure for power.
Fascinating. I fully agree. Convincing people is not doable, and you are much better in action. And if you want to win in the future, plan a game that you will win. Plan a game that the rules are so biased for you that there's no way you can't win. Talking about the differences between the left and the right, there's something quite amazing happening on the left in America. Sanders' campaign predicting victory in Iowa caucuses. It's fascinating to see how Bernie Sanders is performing in the current surveys, and it seems like a deep movement. It's a deep movement, so deep that I could predict it about a year ago, that this guy was headed to be at least the nominee for Democrats, if not the next president. I'm afraid I may be so right about my prediction that we may not even have Trump another 4 years.
Your prediction has proved prescient. We'll see what happens next week, but there's no question that you were onto something. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to look at this because we've seen a ton of attacks on Bernie from the mainstream neoliberal, neoconservative right and left, basically Washington, where they're all both claiming that this is dangerous and that he can never win, and so on. But the fact is, Bernie is getting at the exact populism that Trump got at in 2015 and 2016 that led him to victory. And I think, as I've said on your show a few times, I think that Bernie might be the most devastating candidate to Trump in the general. And Trump admitted as much, actually, in a leaked audio. But he might very well be the most devastating candidate because he hits Trump exactly where it hurts. Bernie in 2016 outperformed his polls dramatically in these Midwestern states where you had the you know, apathetic voters who voted Trump, the former Obama voters who voted for Trump, etc. He would get those people. He's the one who could actually gain a landslide in the way that the mainstream candidates simply cannot. Joe Biden is running a campaign of I have almost universal name recognition. I can beat Trump. I'm well known, so on. My gaffes, I do a new gaff each week, and it's just like water off a raincoat, basically. It doesn't really affect him. He's been remarkably stable, and so on. I think the Democratic Party has flirted with various candidates. Elizabeth Warren had her moment. Buttigieg had his moment. But at the end of the day, Bernie Sanders has a movement, much like Trump had a movement in 2015 and 2016. And he's been able to, take on left forces that have been there for a long time. He's struggling a bit with the kind of woke forces. I think if anything, there might be an upcoming battle between the kind of social democratic left of the 20th century of healthcare for all, free education, etc., with some kind of harder edge left there alongside it. Ban all landlords and eat the rich and all that kind of stuff. But it's going to come up against the woke forces of gay liberation and trans whatever that are entirely compatible with neoliberalism economics, and it actually emerged out of big corporations and the concept of global liberalism. So I think that's an interesting battle that's yet to come. I don't. He apparently the battle between the new rising people of color, not the kind of older line black politicians who are at least up to recently were supporting Biden almost universally. Now they're kind of thinking about Sanders. But the new people of color, the Ilhan Omar, the AOC types, they are on the Bernie train. I think they kind of recognize this as the future, and they also recognize that they can inherit it. That the Jewish socialist from Vermont come Brooklyn, that's not going to be the face of the left 10 years from now. That it's going to be someone like AOC when she's my age, or Ilhan Omar, etc. And so there's not that battle. There's clearly a battle going on with the woke crowd. Bernie's getting accused of anti-Semitism, of misogyny. He's being accused of basically having the alt-right on his side to a degree.
But this is in those circumstances that he shows a Trump-like property, which is Teflon, because the attack from Elizabeth Warren about misogyny, oh my God, it didn't pass well.
It helped him.
And in that sense, he's bringing back the Democrats to a sort of sanity that I think that the balance within the Democratic Party is still that most people would like some sort of return to a 70s model of the left rather than the whole new woke stuff.
No question. And Bernie can be criticized and should be for not going after the establishment. He's always referring to Joe Biden as my friend. And, he did this Democratic Unity tour where he was on stage with billionaires and whatever. I mean, he's played that game. And I think he actually would benefit by viciously going after them. And I think he's going to ultimately have to, because they will go after him. There will be something even more intense than the, RNC attacks on Trump in 2016 if Bernie were to get the nomination. However, vis-a-vis Elizabeth Warren, he didn't cuck. He just didn't. He denied that happened. He effectively called her a liar. He implied it. I think he should have just been like, "Yeah, you're a liar, Liz." But no one really believed it. And again, what happened? If he had admitted defeat like Joe Biden did to Kamala Harris and basically said, "Oh, you're right. I'm white privileged and racist and whatever."
Mm-hmm.
If he had done that, he probably would be sinking because people could just smell blood like sharks. But he didn't. He denied it. He moved on, and his polls went up. And it's all post, Liz's accusations that he's become the front runner. And I don't, it's a coincidence, but I think there's actually, it's not just that he survived the attacks. I think there's direct causality. I think not cucking in the face of these just obviously stupid accusations is good. People like it.
Absolutely. Now, I will disagree with your earlier comment that he would gain in attacking. I think that Bernie has a style and he has developed this rock solid, like, whatever advances the left, I will side with it. I don't care if it's a billionaire. I don't care if it's not perfectly my program. And this is a communist property that is extremely respected in the far left, that is extremely respected for all of the people in the left on the social media who are getting essentially emotionally abused by the new woke crowds where you are guilty of anything at any time, even if you didn't do anything. And right. I think it's a form of not cocking, and it's an empathic one. It's not cocking for the Democratic Party that is always stand before the party. And as all communists know, they all say, the party before the ideas before the party before the individuals. And I think that this is what Bernie Sanders is putting forward. And that's what is getting the attention of people. Also on the Project Veritas stuff. Basically. Right-wingers should learn from what happened in the Project Veritas stuff. We get a couple of staffers from Bernie Sanders exposed as essentially planning the next gulags in America. And what does Bernie Sanders do? He doesn't even fire them. He said, I regret that they've said this, but they're in the party, therefore they're still working in the right direction. You wouldn't see that in the Republican Party.
No, absolutely not. All they are about is denunciations. If you say something edgy about feminism, you can get fired from the RNC. Needless to say, serious criticism of Israel or, gasp racism or anti-Semitism. So yes, yeah, he's doing what we should be doing. I have to say though, I was, the Project Veritas stuff. I think they have done some good things. Some of those leaks coming out of Google were interesting in the sense that was more kind of WikiLeaks style and less a Project Veritas style stuff. In the sense that we got real information about people who are in power. We got some documents about Google and their plans and the way they fiddle with the algorithm, et cetera. But generally speaking, the Project Veritas stuff has struck me as entrapment. And who cares? I mean, some staffer with no power kind of gets edgy while drinking a beer. I mean, is this really proving anything? You could get almost everyone, particularly these kind of lower level, not so savvy and intelligent type people to get edgy, if you ask them the right question. I just wasn't really moved by any of this stuff. And again, he's, James O'Keefe is kind of playing to his conservative audience. The people who respond to this are not Bernie voters. I mean, they're conservatives who are like, oh, you see, this is Trotsky and Lenin who are working for Bernie right now. And they, get all excited about it, but it's not really going to affect the left. It's of dubious value in itself. And, everyone gets a little edgy over a beer. I mean, who cares? I certainly don't.
I agree. We have to stop pursuing people for exploring their cognition. That's also a point I made in the CBS interview. We cannot live under constant moral oppression. It is just not how the human brain develops, especially not the male brain. We like to explore edgy ideas, and it's not necessarily that we mean it. It's not necessarily
that we get mad at people. It's like, that liberal journalist. I just want to.
Let's not say it. Let's not say it.
And it's just kind of like, there is a huge difference between saying something that's kind of bold and a bit stupid and actually doing any of these things. There is a huge gulf. And yeah, it's a bad look. Maybe it bespeaks some moral character flaws or something, but it's just ultimately not a big deal. We've all been edgy particularly after a drink or two. It just leaves me unmoved.
All right. People are telling me, Jeff, when do you get to Israel and Palestine? Don't worry, we'll get there. I just want to push out some super chats before we get to our main subject. John Shepard Smith sends $25. Thank you so much. He says, thoughts on the Skenza forum, Jared Taylor versus E. Michael Jones, who personally would Richard like to debate and about what subject? I will say on this tomorrow on the show at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, we have the organizer of the Skenza forum who will be coming to promote this particular debate. It looks like a debate about is race important or is Christianity more important? We've gone through this many times, you and I, Richard.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm not terribly interested in this debate or debating either of those people, but something good might come out of it. I don't know. It strikes me as strange. There was some comment on Twitter of, the man who thinks race doesn't exist debates the man who thinks Jews don't exist. But anyway, look, something good might come out of it. I find it odd that the Skanza Forum, everyone who attends this thing is red pilled on race. I mean, you're not going to this and particularly risking, Antifa, missiles launched at you, unless you are red pilled in some way. So why are we listening to E. Michael Jones? Like why are we talking to this person who is simply there to undermine and de-radicalize a movement? Why are we talking to him? Why are we, bringing him on board? I don't understand it, to be honest. I don't find E. Michael Jones enlightening in the slightest. I find him at best, a kind of curiosity, a highly intelligent goofball.
Yeah, I've had him once on my show, and I'm disappointed by his contact with reality, to be honest. And that's how I see him, as a psychiatric case, to be honest. And it's not even that it's diagnosable as a specific psychiatric disorder, but he is out there in a very special space of thought, but he doesn't really engage. I mean, put him in front of a graph of genes and clusters of genes in humanity, and he still will deny race, but it's like nothing passes. And so I have no interest in debating with this man much, because he's essentially telling you, my idea is that. Well, okay, then you're not engaging with the universe around you. Thank you. Flags.
Off-the-shelf libertarianism. They have an answer before you ask the question. The answer is more freedom, kind of thing. And his answer is convert to Catholicism. To every question, it's the same answer, and it's just a not, I don't know, a real intellectual should have some ambivalence about things. He should be questioning premises. He should see a certain tragedy to everything that he states, in the sense that there actually is a dark side. There something has to be lost or something. And with E. Michael Jones, we've got to convert everyone to the Catholic faith. I don't know what to say. Not interested.
Right Flag sends $50. Thank you so much. He says, what do you think of Andy Nowicki? Does dissident right attract paranoid schizophrenics? I don't know who Andy Nowicki is. Do you?
I definitely do. I have not been in touch with him for many years. I don't know what he is up to. Did something happen with Andy? I mean, I published him. I might have published him at Talkies Magazine even when I was there, and then I definitely published him at alternativeright.com circa 2010, and Radix. And he was actually kind of, when I took a hiatus from alternativeright.com, he and Colin Liddell were basically editing it. But I have not spoken to him in a number of years, and I haven't really been paying attention. He did write some novel. He's one of these guys where it's like he wrote this novel about post Columbine that was, I actually read it. It was a brief novel, but about this just kind of weird obsession with serious mental illness and the Columbine shooting and nihilism and so on. And I don't know. It's kind of like, if you go there once, maybe that's fine, but if that's your thing, I begin to question you a little bit. I think he wrote a fapping manifesto or something. It's just, yeah. But he's also a family man. But again, I don't know if something's happened. I've not in touch with Andy Nowicki.
He has a Twitter account that says anti-sexual sensualist. Okay. And
Okay.
I think we've reached the point where I'm getting extremely old, Richard, because Privada, my guy on the staff for scheduling, tells me, Jeff, you've had a show with Andy Nowicki.
Oh,
I do not remember this at all. I mean, at this point, we have reached episode, 655. I'm forgetting my own guest. Absolutely amazing. Dr. Frost says, Richard is 100% right on E. Michael Jones. Absolutely, I agree. Martin Madrigal says, Richard, can you please comment on the recent debate between Jared Taylor and E. Michael Jones? He's already given our answers. Stan H says, Richard, what is the best critique of ethno-nationalism? Also, why did Jonathan Bowden describe his politics as Nietzschean instead of ethnic? Thanks.
Well, I could go off for an hour on the problems with ethno-nationalism. I would, if what he's talking about is what I think he's talking about, the one of the fundamental problems with ethno-nationalism is this internecine disputes that it generates within the white race, this breaking us down, resisting unity, and ultimately resisting power. These little nation states exist under an umbrella. There's always a big kahuna who is determining their geopolitical destiny and so on. And I think these are major problems. Yes, Jonathan Bowden was not an ethno-nationalist in a Poland type way. And he was a dyed in the wool Nietzschean. There's no question. And he wanted the best for the white race. Not a kind of, let's seal up our borders, hate our neighbors, and pursue our own little miniature destiny while we dance around a maypole. He was into a bigger form of nationalism than that, and he certainly is one who doesn't have that kind of nostalgic Poland attitude of, look at this precious little community that's kind of been sequestered off from the ravages of the modern world and so on. He wanted to engage with the modern world and drink in the poison and see if you can survive. He had a absolutely Nietzschean attitude towards this. And again, I've sung Jonathan Bowden's praises before. I might have a few critiques here and there, but he was a truly monumental thinker and influenced me tremendously. And I was glad to have known him, although in a limited fashion. But he was a great man.
All right. One last question to launch our reflection on the Trump deal concerning Israel. It comes from John Doe. I won't read all of it because it's a long question, and John Doe, you are touching edgy subjects in there. But he says, Trump's land deal is intrinsically shaped by the Holocaust, as is most of modern history, philosophy, art, and science. I am the world's leading expert on one of the darkest corners of the Shoah. The machines that I have studied are poorly documented, but on one trip to Belzec with David Irving, I did inquire of the locals as to these machines. The females basically said yes in Polish, but one very old man said he had heard that these machines were carried out in Germany proper. I will not read the rest because it's too edgy, your comments, but essentially he's saying the current situation is a post-World War II situation. Of course, the fact that Israel has been territorially dominating Palestine and it has been recruiting the help of the US in doing so. And what did we find ourselves with yesterday? Well, a proposition by Trump that this would be the state of Palestine, so-called two-state solutions. People have been
Yeah,
sharing
it
this image
looks
on
like a
social
22
media.
state solution, kind of,
Yes.
at least in terms of
So I
territorial
don't know.
integrity.
Does each of the green spot here get a zip code or? In any case, they've been sharing this image because it shows essentially the territory occupied by Arab forces within 100 years have been just dropping, and we're essentially faced with colonialism. And the Trump deal to me yesterday, I don't know about you, Richard, but it looks like just further neocolonialism, further securization of the Jewish position toward the domination of the entire country of Israel.
Yes, no question. And this is a big topic, but yeah, it's absolutely a sham. And I think its ultimate goal is to be used as look, for Israel to say, look, we offered peace. We offered them this generous deal, and they didn't take it. And therefore, we are going to annex territories that are currently under illegal settlements by Israelis, and that's what it's about. This is a deal. I mean, again, here is a point where my opinions, at least at the first step down this road, are very similar to what I'm hearing from the actually mainstream left liberal media.
Yes. I felt more at home yesterday at The Guardian than at Fox News.
No question. The Palestinian Authority was not consulted on this plan, and they have sounded off on it last night, which was basically 1,000 times no. I think they literally said this was the brainchild of Jared Kushner. It's being promoted by Bibi Netanyahu and a slightly more moderate Israeli politician as well, Benny Gantz, I believe is his name. And the next day, Jared Kushner, I guess, couldn't help himself, but he's already accepted the fact that it's not going to be palatable to the Palestinians, and is basically saying, these bastards, we have a vision for peace, but these bastards just will never accept it. And he said Palestinians never miss an opportunity to reject a generous offer.
Yeah, this is. Oh, did we lose Richard? I don't know if he's going to be able to reconnect. We may have lost. Oh, right. There he is. He is back. All right. So you were telling us that the Palestinians have been refusing many deals, and this is what we've heard actually on Joe Rogan. What's the name of this Jewish woman at the New York Times? What?
Barry Weiss.
Barry Weiss, yes. And she was like, I've been disabused by respecting the Palestinian people, essentially, because they kept refusing our offers throughout my life. And I'm like, okay, that is how you justify your cognitive dissonance as a Jewish colonizer, but look at the offers you're giving them. I mean, this is ridiculous.
Well, let's kind of go on a bit of a deep dive here. And so, we kind of need to think about how we got here, because, a lot of people say, oh, it's just a mess, and these people have been there and they've been fighting for centuries and so on. And that's not really true, actually. So basically, Palestine was under the sovereignty of the Ottoman Empire. There was a Jewish minority in this territory, and there was actually not a lot of fighting, even though there were these sacred sites that are sacred both to Jews and Muslims. This started to change dramatically with the fall of the Ottoman Empire, and France and Britain and some other countries desire to carve up the region. And basically in 1917 there was the mandate for a Jewish state in Palestine, given by Arthur James Balfour, who's the foreign secretary to Lloyd George. And immediately following the First World War in 1919 and the Paris Peace Conference, there was, again, a formalization of a mandate for a Jewish state in Palestine. Now, the Jews found a friend in Britain, the Zionists who were working in the government, who also saw that at least London thought that they could kind of get America, to come in on their side as well in the First World War by appealing to Jews and so on. There were a lot of different motivations going on, but they felt that they had a friend in Britain. Then throughout the 20s and 30s, you had Zionism, the early stages of Zionism, with Jewish settlers entering the territory, and they are entering a new zone. They are outsiders going into someone's home, and this was generating outrage, violent conflict, etc. And the Brits started to put a kibosh on Jewish settlements, and this led to Jewish terrorism against the British Empire. Israel gained the origin of the two-state solution and the origin of the Jewish state came in 1947 at the behest of the UN. And it was the United Nations that basically created that, original two-state solution for a state for the Arabs and a Jewish state. In the next 20 to 40 years, this new entity that was generated by the international community was running into major conflicts with the Arabs, particularly in the 1967 Six-Day War, that basically where Israel amassed a massive amount of territory, including territory, the Sinai Peninsula, that they eventually gave back to Egypt. But this, that conflict ultimately dissipated, and then became a kind of internal conflict. And what this, vision for peace, deal of the century is the kind of inherent problem of the two-state solution, which is that it's not too different from what we have now and Palestinian occupation. They won't have, Palestinians would not have real access to their holy sites. Palestinians who were expelled into Syria, Jordan, Egypt would not have a right of return. I think there would be a kind of slow trickle refugee program. But these people who feel like they have homes will not be allowed a right of return, and Palestine will be permanently demilitarized. So it's not a state. I mean, you're a state when you got a military and borders. And if you don't have those things, it's not a state. And so this kind of two-state solution just seems to be this perpetuation of the status quo. Ultimately, I think even though I understand from a kind of ethno-nationalist perspective the desire for a two-state solution, that we need to separate these people, I don't think that's workable. I think there ultimately has to be a one-state solution, and it will ultimately have to be organized by the so-called international community. Israel has never existed as a historic state outside of international forces, whether it's the UN granting them independence, whether it's Britain, just again, by diktat, just by writing a declaration, giving them a mandate, whether it's by, gaining territory that was being carved up by Winston Churchill in the 1920s in the British Empire, whether it's basically being part of the American Empire, Pax Americana post World War II. Israel has never really been an independent sovereign entity, and I don't think it ever can be. So I don't know. The notion of a two-state solution is nice. You could even defend it on kind of ethno-nationalist principles, but I don't think it's workable in the sense that these territories are not contiguous. They are extremely close together. There are extreme power imbalances between Israel connected to Washington, Palestinian getting some money from Washington, sure, but not having the kind of military support, not having the big moral and political support that Israel gets from Christian Zionists.
We have a little bug here. Hopefully Richard will be able to reconnect. I've been I'm looking at this situation of Israel, and there are so many parallels to be made with the. Oh, Richard is now back. Hello, Richard. I was
Sorry.
explaining that there are so many parallels to be made between the current situation of Israel and the teenage years. It's like Israel has been living a little bit like a child for all these years under the protection of a parental authority, which in this case is the English and the American governments. And right now, what we have is that Israel is going
They
toward
can't exist
adulthood.
otherwise.
Yes, but that's it. They will have big problems once
They
they
can't,
are on
it's
their
not like a
own.
teenager. Right, because Jewish nationalism ultimately doesn't make sense and eventually gets crushed. I mean, the Romans could peacefully control the territory of Palestine and Jerusalem, but when there are Jewish revolts, the Romans came in and destroyed the temple and
Yeah,
showed them who's boss. Jewish nationalism just does not work at some level. It's a people that's both too particular and too small and too integrated into the world. It's just never really going to work. The kind of uh, Jews were integrated in the Ottoman Empire. They're obviously getting huge favors from the British Empire. They're clearly integrated into the post-war Washington Empire. This is how they operate. Just pure Jewish nationalism, a la Poland, has never existed and probably can never exist. So I think we should just recognize this fact, recognize that the Jewish state came into being through the international community, that smaller communities of Jews lived in peace under the Ottoman Empire. That is, when they did not have sovereignty, when they were not a Jewish state, when they were just religious and social communities. And that ultimately is the answer. I support a one-state solution. I think if there is going to be a state in Palestine, it cannot be a Jewish state. It should be one for all people there. I believe in a right of return for Palestinians who are displaced. I think ultimately and some kind of international body, it probably cannot be Washington, should administer Jerusalem and keep it as perhaps a kind of city state like the Vatican.
this is
But
fascinating. You're arguing for multiculturalism in Israel.
Yes, absolutely.
I think that I like your proposition. That being said, and I agree that Jewish nationalism is a contradiction in term. It is,
Yes.
one words in this sentence is opposed to the other. It doesn't work, but I say we should have a Jewish state to demonstrate what it leads to. I say let them live with each other and own their own successes and failures. And if some writers of historians and sociologists are correct on that, it will turn to be a rather average state, or even one that is not even strongly developed. And so I take the same factual position as you, that it can't exist, but I say let us make it exist to see what happens. Let us make a situation in which
we've
the Jews
seen what's
are both.
It's an ongoing, bloody, horrifying crisis that's led to unhappiness for everyone who's in contact with it.
Yes.
Outside of many Jews who benefit from the system. So I think we've seen enough. I think so many nationalists want to play this game where we say, okay, so it's nationalism for thee and for me. So we're not going to question Zionism and Jewish nationalism, and then you'll let us be nationalists because of some moral Kantian bargain or something. It just does not work like that. It has not worked. We've allowed this Jewish state and Zionism to exist. Has the West become more nationalist? No, it's become clearly more multicultural and liberal and nihilistic and so on. We haven't gained anything from this bargain. that's been going on quite some time, which has been going on for much longer than 1947 and the independence of the Jewish state. So I just don't buy it anymore. I don't think this situation is workable. Everyone.
Oh, we are losing Richard again. Let's hope that he can reconnect. Too bad. It seems that we are faced with Running Wild says, did you miss my previous super chat or didn't want to ask it? It's all good. Just acknowledge it so I know I'm not sending my money to Google for free. Don't worry, Running Wild. I couldn't read all super chats, but I'm getting to them. I didn't forget yours. Right. Richard, you are reconnecting. Perhaps a final question on this.
Real quick.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Everyone who's a mainstream actor in this, whether you're Bibi Netanyahu, you're Samantha Power in Washington, you're Donald Trump, you're, a writer for the New Republic, everyone has agreed on this paradigm of the two-state solution, that this is the answer. And yet we've been saying this for decades, and it's brought nothing but unhappiness and crisis. So why don't we rethink that paradigm and understand that the two-state solution it's a policy failure at some level. It's not workable, and that we need to have a different base concept when we enter into thinking about this crisis. The Palestine area was peaceful and it was workable when it was under imperial hegemony of the Ottoman Empire. It can be workable again if we create one state for all of these people, take out that inherently divisive Jewish quality to it, and allow basically a international maintenance of Jerusalem as a holy site. I think it is the ultimate answer.
Wow. I have to say you make a good case for it. I'm a big partisan of the two-state solution. Of course, the one from Trump is a joke. It's not a true two-state solution, but I have to say you are making a very convincing case. But, there is a problem here. The Jewish majority feels emboldened and feels that it's theirs, and that's ultimately the big problem here. So I don't think that you're going to be able to calm down the forces of the far right. Let's call them the far right of Israel, because even if you were to intervene from outside, eventually it will boil down to their own democracy, and the dynamics will always be one that is aggressive toward the Palestinian question. In fact, one that Bibi Netanyahu himself is about to lose control of, because now he has competitors that are more hardcore than him.
That's true. That's certainly been a long time dynamic. This far Israeli right that's willing to assassinate moderate politicians and so on. But yeah, no, I've said my piece. I was thinking a lot about this last night, which is that at some level we have to recognize it as a policy failure. And if that is true, then we have to rethink our assumptions. We've had this assumption since at least 1947, actually since 1919. The Balfour Declaration said we want a Jewish state that won't disrupt Arab communities and so on. Well, that's failed. We at some point we need to rethink our guiding policy assumptions, and that is the two-state solution, and just move beyond it.
Now, one last question on this subject before we move on to questions of the crowd. What is Trump doing here? Is he just doing moral displays for his potential Jewish base, or what is it? He's trying to gain the image of the best friend of Israel because he thinks it's electorally relevant?
Yeah, I mean, he wants to be viewed as a deal maker. That was one of his most compelling promises in 2016, and so he's offering this. Only I could do it. Only Nixon could go to China or something like that. But it's actually not a great deal, and it certainly is not paradigm changing. It's just basically substantiating the status quo in Israel's benefit. And a real deal maker would do something like Jimmy Carter or so on and get both sides at the table and hash it out. But Trump is unwilling to do that. So I think it's a lot of moral signaling. I think it is a scam in terms of what Bibi Netanyahu is up to. He wants to basically, again, substantiate those settlements. And so this is a way for him to say, oh, look, we offered you all this and you didn't take it. So we're just going to do it anyway.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. And so that's what it's about. But it's absolutely silly. I'm not sure exactly he's playing to the Christian Zionist base, because Christian Zionists, I mean, they don't want anything for the Palestinian. We have who is that woman? Hopkins. She's this British
Katie Hopkins.
She works for, or she worked for, or still works for the rebel media, and she's been around, said some edgy stuff about the Muslims and so on. She's calling for non-peaceful ethnic cleansing on national television. She wants a one-state solution, which is Israel. I've heard this from the rebel quite a bit. And those types of people, that kind of edgy alt-right-ish neocon. And I don't know. I'm sick of it. We need to move beyond that. And we're not. And again, we're not going to gain anything in solving this conflict if we don't offer a basic recognition of the Palestinians and their desires and their hopes and dreams and their feeling of home, which is one of the most powerful feelings for any human being.
I agree. They're very disappointing, these rebel media and right-wing Zionist type of crews that they bash on Muslims all day long, but really they don't expose the other dangers that our countries are faced with and being penetrated with. Caleb says, Richard, did Syrian girl influence your thinking on a one-state solution for Palestine?
She did. I think she kind of knocked me in this direction, but I think I would have headed in that direction anyway. As you know, I've never really been an ethno-nationalist, and just because I've in some ways, because we're not the ones making the decisions. We're not the ones who are at the negotiating table. We're not writing for the New Republic or Washington Post. We kind of have that luxury of rethinking things and questioning assumptions and so on. So I will give her some credit. I think she kind of knocked me in this direction.
So you've never been an ethno-nationalist?
My instincts have always been against ethno-nationalism. Yeah.
Okay.
I've always seen it as kind of petty and.
but wasn't it the idea that you were once talking about ethno-states, right?
My conception of an ethno-state is not ethno-nationalist. It's supranationalist. And it's always been that way.
What does that mean, supranationalist?
It is for the white race.
Okay, so supranationalist in the sense of being encompassing of all white people on Earth.
Correct. And it has always been thought of as something new. This is not a conservative, we've got to close up the borders of the Czech Republic or something, and keep out the Bohemians or something. It's never been about that. It's always been about a new order that's going to come out of this chaos that we're going to experience as Pax Americana disintegrates.
Fascinating. People are on the regular chat and they're saying, now I'm tripping. What? Well, guys, this is what happens when we invite Richard here. We always have our brain challenge pulled in all directions, but it's always interesting. The Rosie
it's legal
Codex,
and healthy way to trip out. You don't have to drop acid. Just listen to me talk about a one-state solution for Palestine. Yeah.
The Rosie Codex says, what are Richard's main criticism of Dugin and the fourth position?
Well, the fourth position is, something that is never really been defined. Dugin recognizes, I think correctly, the three great ideologies of the 20th century: liberalism, communism, and fascism, which kind of came in that order. And liberalism being, in a way, the oldest, but also the most durable, and the paradigm. And he's kind of we need to have a new beginning. We need to open up a kind of psychic space for the fourth political theory. That's at least my understanding of Dugin, and I think that's in a way the most charitable understanding. I think that's where he's right. Dugin himself, I think, is a fascinating guy. I've benefited and enjoyed quite a bit of his writing. I think the criticism of Dugin, but kind of playing all these weird sides and being anti-West and anti-white and so on, almost as for a Russian imperialist to try to be PC. I think people kind of look at this skeptically, as do I. But I do think that he does offer an important perspective, and he's a substantial thinker and man.
Absolutely.
But I'm not a Duginist. I don't know all these. I can't be a Duginist. I don't think the Duginist would actually accept me. I'm kind of like the ultimate Westerner. I represent a lot of what they think is wrong. So, there
the fourth position is a blank page. It's just it's a note that is kept to say something will emerge here. I'm not even sure something will, to be honest. Sun State says, Richard, I'm visiting Chicago soon. Any restaurant recommendations?
Go to West Loop. There's some interesting places that aren't too expensive. Now, you might very well drop between $75 and $100 a person, with a cocktail and a meal. But there's some kind of cool places around there. But Chicago is great. I mean, Chicago is fantastic for food. I mean, you can't really go wrong. I don't know what you want, whether you want something that's kind of hip or whether you want to go get some deep dish.
No, deep dish is horrible. What a bad way to make a pizza. Martin Madrigal says coronavirus may lead to an increase in Bitcoin. It's possible. Not Sean says, Richard, what music have you been listening to?
I've listened to a lot more Morrissey recently, and before that, I kind of got into U2, which was just funny because I was not a fan of U2 when I was younger, and I'm still not really a fan. I have this article idea among my dozens of article ideas that are never implemented, rattling around in my brain. Of U2 is kind of the ultimate globalist artist, and that doesn't mean that they're not good or interesting, but a true globalist artist in a way that some synthetic boy band isn't. A kind of authentic globalism, and I think that comes from their you could say Judeo-Catholicism, which they embraced in the late 70s and early 80s after their first album. So anyway, just throwing out some ideas. Perhaps someone will steal my article idea, but I want to write it this year.
Citizen Olympic says The Greasy Strangler is a true movie, not a meme. Produced by Elijah Wood and directed by Jim Hosking. There are no good YouTube reviews of it. Perfect. I may very well watch it tonight with Mama JF. Pizza Fest says, Richard, have you listened to the neo-folk band Rome? If not, I think you would enjoy their entire catalog. Their lyrics cover many issues on European identity and historical events like Rhodesia.
I have. I've heard some of this stuff. I'm not hugely into neo-folk, but I have encountered a lot of it on YouTube, and it's pretty cool stuff.
Alexander says, Richard, why don't you use Gab anymore?
Well, I guess there are two reasons. The first is that I seem to have been given this dispensation by none other than @Jack, that if I don't massively misbehave, he's not going to kick me off because I'm kind of a, public figure. And even if what I'm saying is toxic, we should at least be able to see it. And, so on. People talk about me a lot on their platform. So it would be kind of weird for me to be deplatformed. So there's really no reason for me to go on Gab. I want to talk to the world, and I want to use Twitter as my blog. And effectively, I mean, my tweets, even tweet storms that I do that are kind of mini little articles, get many multiples of the hits that my 800-word art column would get on radixjournal.com 10 years or 5 or 6 years ago. So it I'm going to use it so long as I can, and it is a major platform. I do think that I'm being shadow banned and that my following count is being throttled because it's been stuck at exactly the same place for many years. So either I've hit my cement ceiling, or some funny businesses going on in the background. But I don't have that much interest in Gab. I mean, look, I'll give my criticism of Gab. I just I just build a good platform. I don't think Gab is a great technological platform, and don't bother with your third rate political opinions that Gab seems to express, just that Torba does. Just build a good technology that people want to use. Build something that would be useful, a Patreon clone, hosting, whatever. Just do something that's good, and don't build like a literal echo chamber, which is what they kept doing. And I think it would have been much better if he had never expressed any kind of political opinion and just said, "I'm a technologist. I'm going to build the best technology possible." And I would say this: I'm not a huge fan of BitChute in the sense that I don't use it a lot. I do upload some stuff there, but I'm still more or less on YouTube. But BitChute, I'm much more positively inclined towards, because the people behind it do not they don't claim to be part of some movement or something. They're just saying, I'm building a platform, and I think it will get better. I think there's some obvious problems with it, but I think it's going to get better, and I'm glad it exists. I just wish Gab would go build a product that I actually want to use, as opposed to saying we've all been banned from we're right wingers who have been banned from Twitter, and we're all here together, and I'm your leader. I've just zero interest in that. I think
It's quite
all of this
cringe.
alt tech stuff from 2 years ago, it's just all been a failure. I mean, with a few exceptions like BitChute.
It's quite cringe to see this Gab account on Twitter make the 20th meme of the day about porn and how it's bad for you. I agree that it's pretty weird. Sky Chaser says, tried to red pill my boomer parents with alt-right IDs. Big mistake. Can't undo a lifetime of delusion and false reality. Waste of my time. It is indeed. Changing the minds of people who are set.
Boomer parents to the Olive Garden and get some breadsticks, and that's probably a better use of time than red pilling them.
Jules Webstein says, ask Richard about his Greco-Roman phase. I don't know what that means. Was this wrestling of some kind?
I think this was asked on the Kill stream or something when I was on. I don't know if this is a reference to that photo, which I think David Alm, one of my classmates at the U Chicago, posted that, and he did like a confessional about, I was once friends with Richard Spencer and he's become this monster. And he posted a funny photo that he took of a party that I hosted at my apartment in Hyde Park, in which I donned a toga. I think that's what he's referring to, but I don't know of any other Greco-Roman phase.
All right. Giggles says, Paul Nealon is vindicated. He doxed and exposed Ricky Vaughn, his Smart Checker and Clearview doxing services. TRS will never apologize. Ethan says, best way to shut down someone.
That's not wrong. I'm not a Paul Nealon fan, but I think he should have done something in a different way. He didn't need to dox an individual, which I think people just immediately read as nasty and unnecessary, and and so on. But I think focusing on, I'm very worried about this behind the scenes operation that's going on. And yeah, TRS will never. I doubt they'll ever talk about it. I mean, prove me wrong, but they were promoting Ricky Vaughn, and they have a community which was obviously going to be a target for Smart Checker. You have a community that can easily be channeled in directions that's pro-Republican, etc. So it's a big issue.
I consider Mike Enoch a friend, and in fact, we're planning on having him again on the show very soon. But it's true that I've seen him grift to anything new, including, for example, the Groyper rise. And I mean, you can make a case that it's a rational behavior, given that he's looking for exposure, he's looking to represent his audience, and that's where the audiences were for like a week. But he's kind of one man I respect, but who does the following of anything relevant, somehow missing sometimes a critical look of it. Ethan says, best way to shut down someone who calls you a neo-Nazi.
Just let it flow off like rain off a raincoat.
Yeah,
I don't know.
exactly.
I'm sure some people will say, you do the yes meme or whatever. I don't think that's exactly right, because we're not neo-Nazis, but just don't let it harm you. Don't start apologizing or explaining why you're not a Nazi. Just be just kind of like, yeah, I'm a badass.
Yeah, I've tried many times to continue the conversation as if this was never said. And you'll see people will be like, oh my God, this guy has balls, or what is he doing? He's not denying. And this absence, they will notice, and you will earn respect for it. To say like, this is so low, I'm not even engaging with it. Machiavelliscus says, whites will support whites. All right, that makes sense. T. Torchon says the results of the Groyper is that they ignited the youth and they tarnished TPUSA. It was in relation to our earlier comment that there wasn't much coming out of it. I guess, yes, they did attack TPUSA, but they tarnished it only to the extent, only within the movement. It's not something that has reached wider reach.
No, I mean, I don't know how they've tarnished it at all. TPUSA was fundraising off BTFOing the Groypers, and he's, Charlie Kirk is, sipping champagne with the Trumps on New Year's Eve. I mean, I don't think they did it. Was the opinion of TPUSA among the alt-right really high, and then the Groypers red-pilled us on the problems of Charlie Kirk or whatever? I mean, I don't think so. I think it did clearly ignite the youth, and it was a moment where the rubber hit the road, where the movement, which is a lot about podcasting and tweeting and writing articles, etc., was actually engaging with the real world, and something should be said for that.
T. Torchon says, was Sam Hyde effective despite cross-dress comedy? Sam Hyde, I don't know much about his contribution. I don't know about you, Richard.
I was never hugely into Sam Hyde. I met him once, and he was a fun guy. And he's done some things that I thought have been really hilarious and insightful. And maybe he's done other things where I'm kind of like, I don't know, I guess I'm just too old for this, or like kind of weird. But he's an interesting character, and I met him again, and personally I liked him. So, but I'm not really in his loop.
Running Wild says, is Cantwell right about Joachim and the heel turn guys working with Vaughn, or the Bullcast guys? I know Cantwell has done dumb things. Is he legit?
I don't know anything about that.
Yeah, about Cantwell, isn't he in prison? I think he was put in jail recently. Yeah. Unfortunately, he is in jail. I don't know. I don't have any updates on this other than this. MC Semple, propertarianism, is that the answer to the right or the foe to the right?
It's right up there with E. Michael Jones, in my opinion.
Elia Logo Bizarre says, no, I will not read this super chat. In fact, I will have to delete it. Do not do threats of violence in the super chat, even if they are against yourself. That is a rule. All right. Chris Cleveridge says, do you or Richard think a powerful caliphate will form and conquer in the absence of the global Western power? It's true that there's a rise of the Muslim population. It is the fastest growing population on the globe. Will this keep going to the point of being a superpower internationally?
It might very well, and to be honest, it might be the natural political form in that region, in the sense that we as Westerners like to project nationhood onto these people, but a much more natural political form would be something like a caliphate and so on. I could see something like that happening. This is, we should get Ed Dudden on here. Once the book comes out, you should definitely get him on, because his book is, highly critical of Islam from a kind of, Anglo enlightened perspective. But then it ultimately gives Islam its due. And his prediction is that Islam will come to dominate the world.
Very interesting. Fernando Covet recommends in Chicago Fogo de Chao. That is true. I've been there. It's good, but I mean, it's the Brazilian buffet. And so it's, at the end, you've tasted lots of meats and you'll be happy, but it's not superb cuisine. It's not like out of the ordinary, but it's good meat and infinite amount of meat.
What is this?
The Fogo de Chao. It's a Brazilian buffet.
Oh, I love that place.
Yeah. It's good meat. It's not like top cuisine in the world, but it is good pieces of meat and as much as you can eat. Lawrence Forbes says, I found a small book by Nietzsche in a used bookstore this afternoon called Why I Am So Wise. I guess if you're a genius, you're entitled to a somewhat inflated ego. Yes?
Yes, that's from Ecce Homo. So, behold the man. So, reference to Christ as well. But and Nietzsche's entitled to be gargantuanly egotistical.
All right. Dion Cunning says, there's a famous quote. I was wondering if Richard can complete. It starts like this. We're coming back here, ... I don't know.
I think that's,
No, okay, let's not.
I think that's a troll comment.
Okay, a troll comment. Chris Cleveridge says, Richard, will you and Mark do a review of Blade Runner 2049?
Yeah, we should. We actually did a podcast on that a few years ago. So it's not on YouTube. It should be in my podcast feed. But yeah, we should revisit Blade Runner. And I really like that film. And I think Denis Villeneuve, would that be the right way to pronounce his name?
Denis Villeneuve,
he's French,
yes.
French Canadian. I actually think he's a genius, especially when it comes to visuals. But I think he's a genius when it comes to communicating visually, communicating ideas visually. And that's something different than just having beautiful images on the screen. And so I can't wait for Dune. I am a fanboy when it comes to his upcoming Dune film, which I have a sense that it's going to be really good. Some people are predicting it's going to be a disaster or whatever, but I don't think so. And I don't think he's going to do something woke as well, like the problems with Star Wars, where there's interesting source material. You could make a really cool Star Wars movie if you wanted to. But it just became a joke. But I don't think Dune's going to be like that. I think he's going to do it justice. And I'm very excited for it. I think it comes out in November or December of this year.
All right. And Titor Shaw says, Groypers gained people, TP USA lost people. Baby steps. All right. Furry S says, any chance that Edward Dutton will be appearing on your channel again anytime soon?
My channel?
Yes.
Yes. It's actually kind of funny. He's going to appear, if not weekly, multiple times per month. But it's kind of funny. We did this podcast or broadcast, recorded stream. I prefer recording, just for the reasons like we've suffered through today of me dropping out and so on. But we did this recording and then we lost the audio of about 15 minutes. So we actually went back today and we all put on the same clothes we were wearing. And so and I'm going to patch it together. It's not even in order. It's not like we lost the last.
All right. I think we've lost Richard again. T. Torchon says, in Chicago, you go to Alenia or the North Pound. Matthew says, Jeff, if you have time, could you please review Nigel Farage final EU Parliament meeting speech. I will not tonight, but I will take a note, and perhaps in a solo show I can do that. I wasn't aware that there was a last speech of Farage in the EU. I'm very enthusiastic to hear it. It must be emotional. He must be putting a lot behind it. Richard is back now. Right flag sends $20. Richard, you have been critical of so-called high IQ nationalism, but you have to admit HBD is the LTS part of the dissident right, our host being arguably one of the HBD stars. What is HBD? Human
Human
biodiversity.
biodiversity.
Okay. It's like, I don't know who he's calling a star. Our host. Is it me? I'm a star of
Yes.
human biodiversity, I guess. That being said, human biodiversity and IQ are very different questions. And IQ, you are dangerously playing with something that correlates with all sorts of other things when you start wanting to improve the IQ of your society artificially.
No question. Edward Dutton actually gets into this when we discuss it. He gets into it in this book that will be published in the next few days, and then also in a subsequent work which will be published in the next few months. Yeah, I remain a kind of you know Nietzschean critic. You could say probably in Ed's mind, I'm the English major critic of hard science and so on. But yeah, I remain a critic of it, but that's something different than someone who dismisses these things or doesn't want to talk about them. I want to talk about them. I just want to be the guy who sees the limits of it all and who pushes back a little bit.
All right. Krillin says, Richard, can you explain more about the Palestinian right of return? Can you recommend a source that is unbiased on history of the Ottoman Empire? Oh, I think that we're repeatedly losing Richard. I think we might want to end the show here because it has become impossible to hold him more than a few seconds. Oh, and now he is back. Sorry, Richard, we're losing you repeatedly.
I don't know if this is I'm actually thinking about doing a full reboot on my computer. But anyway, yeah, I mean, immediately after the independence of Israel, which was granted to them by the United Nations, and there was a war in 1948 and 49 that led to a tremendous dispossession of the Palestinian people. And there have been ongoing territorial gains and in the occasion territorial losses as Israel has expanded. So this is not a secret or so on. There are radical historians, revisionist historians who want to claim that this was just empty land that the Jews went into, but I don't think anyone, including Zionists, take them seriously. The fact that Hopkins and people like this explicitly call for ethnic cleansing kind of demonstrates that there are people there now. There are many more, hundreds of thousands who lost their homes and were expelled into Egypt, Jordan, or Syria.
We have two last questions before we conclude the show. Elia says, what is worse, living through a Bernie Sanders presidency or dying of prostate cancer? I think it was a it was a rhetorical question. He also asked about the restaurants
dying of prostate cancer is clearly worse than a 20th century style social democrat gaining power, who probably, to be frank, won't be able to implement his wildest dreams.
I will write right away to the Bernie campaign that they can use this clip of my show in an official announcement. I think that prostate cancer is worse.
Clearly worse.
Powerful Identity says, Richard, what are your thoughts on the British Empire and its influence on the world today? Very interesting question, because they're not very strong, right?
Its influence on the world today. This is such a big historical question. I don't quite know where to begin. I might even pass on this one. This is so big. I'm gonna,
Yeah,
you got to ask a little bit, stronger questions there. Um, uh, yeah, it's a
but
very different. It's not a terrestrial empire in the way that, say, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, the German Empire, or so on, or the Russian Empire were. It was a kind of more maritime globalist entity, and it in that way it had a tremendous amount of influence on the American Empire. I don't think America inherited the British Empire. I think it replaced it, but it is much closer to many of those dynamics that were present in the British Empire than it is to a kind of terrestrial EU Germanic land power empire. I'll just leave it
very
at that.
interesting. Richard, I'll be following your news concerning the new book. As soon as it's out, I'd like to read it and I'll comment on it on my show. Thank you so much
Sure, I'll
for
send you one.
coming. Do you have any last words to our crowd before we conclude?
No, very good questions, and I appreciate that. So,
Absolutely. And we have the answer to the survey of tonight on entropy. Will the Trump offer lead to peace? The vast majority says no. 3 people say yes. Would you vote no on this?
yeah, obviously, it's not going to lead anywhere. It's certainly not going to lead to peace. Yeah.
All right. Everyone sleep well. Richard and everyone, much love. And I will see you tomorrow.